I have lost track of time. You must be from the gods. Those were the first words he spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the kind of sincerity that makes you pause. Today's story isn't just about what happened, it's about what it meant. Because sometimes the smallest moments create the biggest impact. Sit back. Listen closely. This is CAD Narrates. It was February 14th, 2026, a day the world celebrates love, a day of red roses, candlelight dinners, filtered photos, and carefully typed messages. But in a quiet stretch of land on the outskirts of the city, where the road slowly turns from asphalt to dust, Valentine's Day meant nothing, because time itself had stopped there. Or at least, it had stopped for him. He stood outside a small structure made from patched zinc sheets and salvaged wood. The kind of place people politely call temporary, even though it has been permanent for years. Behind him was a wide, open field of green grass, not the manicured kind you see in gated estates. Wild grass, untimmed, growing without permission. Beyond that field, a body of water. Still, heavy, ancient. Locals said large creatures lived in it, creatures that surfaced at dusk. He lived near them, unbothered. There was something about isolation that had settled into his bones. Not sadness, not exactly, but a quiet detachment. He had not checked a calendar in months. He had not scrolled through a phone. He had not measured life in dates. Instead, he measured it in sunrises, in hunger, in firewood, in survival. That morning, he had woken up the way he always did, with the sound of birds arguing in the trees and the cool air clinging to his skin. He stepped outside, gathered small sticks, arranged them carefully, struck a flame. The fire caught slowly, hesitantly. He leaned forward, blowing gently, coaxing the orange glow into life. There is something deeply symbolic about lighting a fire. You do it when you need warmth, when you need food, when you need hope. He didn't know that at that exact moment, miles away, someone was driving toward him, holding something red, holding something fragile, holding something the world associates with love. He had no idea, because he had lost track of time. And when you lose track of time long enough, you begin to forget what day it is. You begin to forget what the world is celebrating. You begin to live outside of urgency. So when she arrived, stepping out of her car and walking toward him, he looked at her with genuine confusion, not fear, not suspicion, just confusion. She smiled and greeted him. And then she asked a simple question. What day is it today? He paused, not because he didn't hear her, but because the question felt distant. What day? He looked up at the sky, as if the clouds might answer. Is it Friday? He asked gently. There was no embarrassment in his voice, only uncertainty. And in that moment, she realized something. He truly didn't know. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't joking. He had drifted so far from the rhythm of society that February 14th was just another sunrise. And when she told him it's Valentine's Day, he froze. Then suddenly he screamed in his dialect. Ah! Ah! Chiniki! It was not fear. It was joy. Pure, unfiltered joy. The kind that escapes before pride can contain it. He placed his hand on his chest, smiling, almost trembling. And then he looked at her again, deeply. You must be from the gods. There are places the world forgets, not because they are invisible, but because they are inconvenient to remember. His home stood on land that didn't belong to anyone important. No paved roads led there. No streetlights washed over it at night. No delivery drivers accidentally passed through. It was the kind of place you only arrive at if you mean to. A wide stretch of green surrounded the small structure he called home. The grass grew wildly, unapologetically, bending with the wind, whispering to itself. Beyond the grass sat the water, heavy, patient. Local fishermen avoided going too deep into it. They claimed there were big water animals that surfaced at dusk, creatures that moved without sound, disturbing the surface just enough to remind you that something ancient lived beneath. He had grown used to those stories. When you live on the edges of society, even fear becomes familiar. But this wasn't always his life. There was a time when he woke up to alarms, when he owned a phone that buzzed endlessly, when he knew what day it was without thinking. There was a time when February 14th meant something. Years ago, he had lived in the city, not comfortably, but connected. He worked small jobs, construction, deliveries, odd repairs. He was never wealthy, but he was present in the rhythm of things. He had friends who called him, neighbors who borrowed salt. A small room he rented, and then life shifted. Not dramatically, Not in a way that makes headlines, just slowly. One missed payment became 2. One lost job became months of searching. One broken phone became silence. When the phone stopped working, he told himself he would replace it soon. But soon became later, and later became maybe. And then he stopped checking for time altogether. At first, he still counted days. He scratched small lines into a piece of wood, 1 mark for each sunrise. But when the days began to feel identical, when hunger felt the same on Monday as it did on Sunday, when no one expected him anywhere, the marking stopped. Time became unnecessary. He lived by light. Morning meant opportunity. Afternoon meant heat. Evening meant survival. Night meant prayer. And that is something no one talks about enough. When a person loses connection to society, they do not always lose faith. In fact, sometimes faith is the only clock left. Every evening, before sleep, he would sit outside his shack and look toward the dark outline of the water. He would speak softly, not loudly like someone demanding answers, but gently, like someone who had learned not to expect immediate responses. Chiniki, he would say, a name that carried both reverence and intimacy. He did not pray for wealth. He did not pray for fame. He prayed for provision, for daily bread, protection from sickness, for strength to wake up again. And perhaps, though he would never admit it aloud, he prayed not to be forgotten, because poverty does something strange. It doesn't only empty your pockets, it can empty your visibility. The world moves quickly, and if you fall behind long enough, it moves without you. That was why, when she asked him what day it was, he searched the sky for an answer. Not because he was foolish, but because dates no longer lived in his world. He did not know it was February 14th. He did not know the world was exchanging roses and promises. He only knew that his fire needed tending. And that morning, as he blew gently into the small flame, watching it catch, he whispered something unusual. God, today, let there be something. He did not define what something meant. Maybe food, maybe good news, maybe a reminder that he was still seen. He didn't know that miles away, someone had already decided to drive toward him, carrying a rose, carrying a small token, carrying presents. There are moments in life when 2 separate prayers meet in the middle, one spoken in desperation, the other spoken in compassion, and neither person realizes they are answering each other. By the time she turned onto the dusty road leading to his home, the fire had fully caught. Orange flames danced, smoke curled upward, and he felt, though he could not explain why, that something was different about the air. Not louder, not brighter, just expectant. He stood, brushing ash from his hands, and that was when he heard it. The distant hum of an engine. Cars did not often come this way. Visitors were rare. He turned slowly toward the road, squinting, watching dust rise behind the approaching vehicle. For a brief second, an old instinct flickered inside him. The instinct of a man who once belonged to the busy world. The instinct of anticipation. He didn't know what was coming. He didn't know the date. He didn't know that the rest of the world called this day Valentine's Day. All he knew was that someone was driving toward him. And sometimes, when you have lost track of time long enough, a single arrival can feel like destiny.